The book of Numbers often leaves the reader with a very specific image of the Israelites. A dusty, tired, complaining camp of former slaves, completely dependent on manna, just trying to survive an endless wilderness. But that is only the view from the inside. If you change the vantage point, if you stand on the high places overlooking the Jordan Valley at the end of their 40-year journey, you did not see a struggling group of refugees. You saw an absolute terror. By the time we reach Numbers chapter 22, Israel has just arrived in the plains of Moab. They are camped directly across the river from Jericho. And they have just done the impossible. They have completely annihilated two of the most formidable military powers in the region, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. Looking down at this massive, sprawling sea of tents is a king named Balak. He is the ruler of Moab. The biblical text tells us that his kingdom was not just afraid. It says Moab was overcome with sickening dread. Balak stares at this approaching camp and describes them not as a human army, but as a mindless, consuming force of nature. He says, "This horde will lick up everything around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." Balak is terrified. His kingdom is next. Most people assume that when an ancient king faces an overwhelming invading force, the story will turn to bronze, chariots, and spears. We expect a council of war. We expect a military strategy. But the text does something entirely different. Balak does not summon his generals. He does not rally his troops. He looks at Israel and understands something deeply accurate. Conventional weapons will not work against this people. Balak recognizes that the power of Israel is not in their military strategy. Their power is supernatural. Their protection is completely tethered to their God. And so, Balak decides to fight them where he thinks they are actually vulnerable, not in the valley, but in the unseen realm. If he cannot pierce their armor, he will dismantle their blessing. This sets up one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and layered sequences in all of Scripture. It is a story that reveals a massive contrast between two different ways of viewing the divine. To a king like Balak, the spiritual realm is just an economy. It is a marketplace. In the ancient Near East, curses were not just bad words or insults. They were considered real, tangible, devastating weapons. Kings would routinely hire professional seers and diviners before a battle to place a binding curse on their enemies. The belief was simple. If you pay the right prophet and offer the right sacrifices, you can manipulate the gods to do whatever you want. Balak believes he can buy a curse against Israel. He believes that whatever blessing rests on this nomadic camp can be stripped away if he just pays enough money to a famous spiritual mercenary named Balaam. This is the tension that drives the entire story. Balak is about to launch a massive spiritual assault against the people of God, dragging a prophet from mountain to mountain, trying to force heaven to curse what it has already blessed. But Balak does not reach for a sword. He reaches for a transaction. He reaches for something he believes is far more dangerous. Balak does not pray. He negotiates. When you understand the ancient world, you realize that paganism was not just a religion. It was an economy. In the ancient Near East, the gods were unpredictable. They were powerful, yes, but they were also considered needy. They needed food, which came through sacrifices. They needed honor, which came through temples. And because they had needs, they had a price. If a king wanted to win a war, he did not just build a better army. He hired a better priest. He offered a larger sacrifice. He outbid his enemy for divine favor. This was the transactional nature of the ancient world. You put the right sacrifice into the system. You perform the right ritual, and the gods are obligated to give you the result you want. It was spiritual machinery. Balak looks at the camp of Israel, and he assumes their God operates by the exact same rules. He assumes the God of Israel is just another regional deity who can be bought, bargained with, or manipulated if you find the right leverage. Balak does not understand covenant. He only understands contracts. A contract is based on mutual exchange, and if one party pays more, the contract can be broken. But a covenant is based on steadfast love. It is a promise that does not depend on the whims of a marketplace. Balak, however, is completely blind to this. He is trying to bring a contract into a covenantal space. So, in Numbers chapter 22, verses 5 through 7, Balak sends a delegation. He sends the elders of Moab and Midian on a journey of hundreds of miles. They are looking for a man named Balaam. Balaam is not an Israelite. He is an international diviner, a spiritual mercenary, a man with a reputation so massive that Balak says to him, "I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." Notice the power dynamic in that sentence. Balak does not believe the blessing comes from the character of God. He believes the blessing comes from the mouth of the prophet. He thinks the spiritual power is a commodity, and Balaam holds the keys. When the delegation arrives, the biblical text includes a small detail that reveals exactly how Balak views the spiritual realm. Verse 7 says the elders departed with the fees for divination in their hand. That sounds small. It is not. That one detail is the hinge of the entire conflict. Balak is trying to purchase a supernatural weapon. He is bringing a blank check to a spiritual assassin. He wants Balaam to stand on a mountain, look down at Israel, and speak words of destruction that will break their momentum and strip away their divine protection. Balak is operating on the only system he knows, the system of fear, manipulation, and transaction. He believes that blessing is fragile. He believes it can be reversed if you pay the right price and hire the right voice. And to be fair, in the pagan world, that was often true. The gods of the nations were fickle. Their loyalty could be bought. Their favor could shift depending on who offered the better sacrifice. Balak is banking his entire kingdom on the assumption that Israel's God can be bribed to abandon his people. But this is where the story shifts from a political maneuver to a profound theological collision. Balak thinks he is just dealing with another regional deity. He thinks he is dealing with an economy of curses. He is about to find out that the God of Israel cannot be hired. Balak finally gets his profit. After a long journey, Balaam arrives in Moab, and the king wastes no time. He immediately takes his hired seer to the high ground. In Numbers chapter 22, verse 41, morning breaks. Balak leads Balaam up a mountain to a place called Bamoth Baal. The name itself is steeped in dark history. It translates directly as the high places of Baal. This is not neutral territory. This is a summit historically dedicated to a Canaanite storm god. Balak is bringing a spiritual mercenary to an ancient pagan stronghold, hoping the atmosphere itself will lend supernatural weight to the attack. From this peak, Balaam looks down and sees a fraction of the Israelite camp. He sees the outer edges of the people, and then the ritual begins. Balaam tells the king to build 7 altars. He demands 7 bulls and 7 rams. This is a staggering level of sacrifice. In the ancient Near East, the number 7 represented completeness, order, and maximum power. Balak is sparing no expense. He is loading the spiritual machine with the most premium fuel possible. He is turning all the dials to maximum. He is doing everything perfectly according to the rules of his religion, believing that if the ritual is flawless, the divine realm has no choice but to obey. Smoke rises from the 7 altars. Balak and the royal princes of Moab stand around the burning sacrifices, waiting. Balaam walks away to a bare height, searching for a spiritual manifestation. He is looking for a divine weapon to hand to the king. But when Balaam returns, the entire pagan system shatters. He stands beside the king, opens his mouth, and the curse does not come. God intercepts the transaction. He takes hold of the prophet's tongue and forces him to speak a blessing over the very people Balak is trying to destroy. Balaam looks down at the dusty tents and says, "How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced?" Balaam tells the king that this people dwells alone. That phrase is crucial. He is not just talking about their geographic isolation in the desert. He is saying they operate on an entirely different spiritual frequency. They are not reckoned among the nations. They are outside the dark economy of Moab. You cannot buy a curse against a people who belong to the God of Israel. Balak is absolutely furious. He looks at his expensive burning altars. He looks at the prophet he just paid. And he demands, "What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and behold, you have done nothing but bless them." It is a moment of profound theological humiliation. Balak tried to purchase a curse against the people of God, and God used the transaction to publicly broadcast their blessing. Not a secret blessing, a blessing spoken loudly over the high places of the enemy. This should have been the end of the story. Balak should have realized that the God of Israel is not bound by the economics of fear. He should have seen that covenant love cannot be reversed by 7 rams and a mountain altar. But that is not how a transactional mind works. When a machine fails, you do not abandon the machine. You adjust the settings. Balak refuses to surrender. He believes the curse is still possible. He just thinks he made a tactical error. He looks down at the camp, and he concludes that the vision was too broad. He assumes the problem was not the God. He assumes the problem was the geography. In Numbers chapter 23, verse 13, Balak reveals the terrifying logic of a transactional mind. If the spiritual machine does not work, you do not abandon it, you change the location. Balak looks at Balaam and says, "Come with me to another place, from which you may see them. You shall see only a fraction of them, and shall not see them all. Then curse them for me from there." Do not miss the psychology in that demand. Balak believes in line-of-sight magic. He assumes the blessing over Israel is somehow tied to their overwhelming visual presence. If Balaam looks at the entire camp, the sheer size of the blessing is too strong to pierce. But if they move to a different angle, if they can just isolate a small, weak-looking fraction of the people on the outer edges, maybe the spiritual armor will have a crack. It is a strategy of fragmentation. Balak thinks that if he can divide the people in the prophet's eyes, he can break the blessing. So they move to the field of Zophim, on the top of Mount Pisgah. Once again, the ritual begins. 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams. The exact same transactional machinery, just rebooted on a new summit. Balak is still trying to turn the dial of sacrifice to maximum, hoping to override the previous result. Balaam walks away to meet with God. When he returns, Balak is standing by his burnt offering, waiting. The king asks eagerly, "What has the Lord spoken?" Balak is still operating under the illusion that he is in a negotiation, but God's response on this second mountain is one of the most famous declarations in the Old Testament, and it completely shatters Balak's theology. Balaam opens his mouth, and God says, "God is not man, that he should lie, or a son of man, that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it?" This is not just poetry. This is an earthquake in the ancient world. In the surrounding pagan cultures, the gods did lie. They were entirely fickle. They changed their minds constantly based on who offered them more meat, more gold, or more blood. The pagan gods acted exactly like amplified, selfish human beings. But Yahweh is drawing a massive contrast. He is telling the king of Moab, "I am not like you. You cannot bribe me. You cannot negotiate with my promises. My covenant is not a contract that you can outbid." Then Balaam delivers the fatal blow to Balak's plan. "Behold, I received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot revoke it." The word, translated as revoke, carries the idea of turning back or returning something. Balak wants to reverse the blessing, but God says the blessing is a fixed reality. It is an immovable object. And then, God says something incredibly beautiful about the people in the valley. Verse 21 says, "He has not beheld misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord their God is with them." That detail is staggering. If you read the rest of the book of Numbers, you know that the camp down in the valley is full of trouble. They complain, they rebel, they doubt. But from the mountain, through the lens of God's covenant, they are secure. Balak is looking for a crack in their armor. He is looking for a weakness to exploit. But God looks at his people and sees them through the filter of his own unbreakable promise. He is shielding them entirely. Balak is crushed again. His expensive investment has failed a second time. You would think the king would finally surrender, but a heart gripped by fear does not think clearly. Balak does not repent. He does not flee. Instead, he makes one final, desperate move that will push this spiritual standoff to its absolute breaking point. At this point in the narrative, Balak has lost twice. He has spent immense wealth. He has built 14 altars. He has offered 28 royal sacrifices, and he has absolutely nothing to show for it but a prophet who keeps pronouncing divine favor over his enemies. But panic makes a man irrational. In Numbers chapter 23, verse 27, Balak says to Balaam, "Come now, I will take you to another place. Perhaps it will please God that you may curse them for me from there." Notice the word perhaps. The king of Moab is no longer operating with the arrogant certainty of a man buying a contract. He is grasping. He is hoping to find a blind spot in God's vision. Balak leads Balaam to the top of Mount Peor, a peak that looks down over the wasteland. Once again, he orders the construction of 7 altars. Once again, he offers 7 bulls and 7 rams. He throws everything he has into the machinery of his religion for one final, desperate attempt. But something shifts on this third mountain. In the first 2 attempts, Balaam went away to seek omens, using his standard pagan methods to look for a spiritual opening. But Numbers chapter 24, verse 1, says that when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to look for omens. He simply set his face toward the wilderness. He looks down at the camp, and the Spirit of God rushes upon him. What comes out of Balaam's mouth this time is not just a refusal to curse. It is a sweeping, cinematic vision of Israel's future. He looks at the dusty, tired camp in the valley and says, "How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel." He describes them as valleys stretching out, as gardens beside a river, as aloes planted by the Lord. He prophesies that their king shall be higher than Agag, and their kingdom shall be exalted. The blessing does not weaken on the third mountain. It expands. It becomes a prophecy of total victory. And then, Balaam utters the final, devastating blow to the king of Moab. He says, "Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you." Balak absolutely breaks. The text says that Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together in a sudden fit of rage. He screams at the prophet, "I called you to curse my enemies, and behold, you have blessed them these 3 times. Therefore, now flee to your place." Balak tells him that the Lord has held him back from honor and wealth. He refuses to pay him. The grand transaction has completely collapsed. Balaam looks at the furious king and reminds him of the warning he gave on day 1. Even if Balak were to give him his house full of silver and gold, he cannot go beyond the word of the Lord. He cannot curse what God has blessed. Balaam turns around and heads back to his own place. Balak goes his own way. The mountains fall silent. The altars burn down to ash. It seems like the great spiritual war is over. Balak has been defeated. God has shielded his people completely. But there is a silent detail in this story. A detail happening down in the valley while these 2 men argued on the peaks. And when you realize what Israel was doing while God was defending them, this entire mountain sequence becomes absolutely staggering. While Balak was dragging a prophet from peak to peak, frantically trying to reverse the favor of God, something incredible was happening down in the valley. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Think about the sheer scale of the cosmic drama unfolding on the high places. A pagan king is panicking. A massive fortune is being spent. 21 royal altars are built. The heavy smoke of burning bulls and rams is rising into the desert sky. A famous spiritual mercenary is being pushed to his absolute limits, wrestling with the spirit of the living God. The atmosphere is thick with dread, negotiation, and supernatural tension. And directly below all of this, the camp of Israel is just going about its day. They are waking up. They are gathering manna. They are tending to their livestock. They are repairing their tents. They are probably complaining about the heat, the food, and the dust, just like they have done for the last 40 years. They have absolutely no idea what is happening above them. They do not know the name Balak. They do not know who Balaam is. They do not hear the curses being requested, and they do not hear the blessings being spoken. Not a single Israelite is fasting. Not a single priest is praying for deliverance. Not a single soldier has drawn a sword to defend the camp against this unseen assault. They are completely unaware. We often assume that our safety depends on our vigilance. We assume that spiritual warfare requires our constant, hyper-focused attention. We think we have to see every enemy, anticipate every attack, and fight every single battle. But the story of Balak reveals a deeply comforting truth about the nature of God's covenant. The greatest spiritual attack ever launched against the nation of Israel in the wilderness was fought and won without them doing a single thing. God defended them while they were oblivious. He shielded them from an enemy they did not know existed. He intercepted a weapon they could not see. He used a prophet they had never met, on a mountain they had never climbed, to secure a victory they did not even know they needed. When God told Balaam he has not beheld misfortune in Jacob, he was not saying the camp was perfect. The book of Numbers proves they were entirely imperfect. They were rebellious, stubborn, and often faithless. But God's defense of his people was not based on their performance. It was not based on their perfect awareness. It was based entirely on his promise. His covenant love is a shield that operates even when his people are asleep. For 3 chapters, Scripture pulls back the curtain to show us the invisible lengths God will go to in order to protect what he has claimed. The enemy spent his wealth, his energy, and his gods trying to find a single crack in the armor of grace, and he failed completely. Israel survived the mountains of Moab without ever lifting a finger. The external threat was neutralized. The curse was dismantled before it could even be spoken. But the story does not end with Balak simply going home, because while an outside enemy cannot curse what God has blessed, an inside enemy is a completely different story. Balak realized he could not destroy them from the mountain. He realized he could not buy a spiritual weapon to break their ranks. So he decided to destroy them from within the camp. He realized he did not need a curse. He just needed a temptation. And what happens next changes the warning of this entire narrative. The altars on the high places are cold. The prophet has been dismissed without his gold. The king of Moab has retreated. If you stop reading at the end of Numbers chapter 24, it looks like a complete and final victory. The spiritual assault failed. The people are safe. But then you turn the page. Numbers chapter 25 opens with one of the most devastating whiplash moments in the entire wilderness journey. The text says, "While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab." Suddenly, the men of Israel are leaving the camp. They are wandering into the local villages. The Moabite women invite them to the sacrifices of their gods. The Israelites sit down. They eat the pagan meat. They bow down before the local deities. Verse 3 delivers the crushing blow. It says, "So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and immediately the anger of the Lord is kindled against his people. A plague breaks out in the camp. Thousands die." What just happened? How does a nation go from absolute, impenetrable divine protection on the mountain to utter devastation in the valley within a single chapter? Did God's protection fail? Did Balak finally find a stronger curse? The answer is found centuries later, at the very end of the Bible. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 14, Jesus is speaking to the church in Pergamum, and he pulls back the curtain on exactly what happened between Numbers 24 and 25. Jesus says, "You have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality." That detail changes the entire story. Balaam could not curse the Israelites. He knew the economy of curses had failed. But Balaam was a shrewd man. Before he left, he gave the king a different strategy. He essentially told Balak, "You cannot break their armor from the outside. Their God is shielding them. But If you can get them to break their own covenant, their God is holy. He will have to discipline them himself. Do not fight them, Balaam advised. Seduce them, and it worked. Balak realized he did not need a supernatural weapon. He just needed an invitation to a feast. He did not need a prophet on a mountain. He needed a few women in the valley. This is the great tragedy of Peor. Balak spent a fortune trying to manipulate heaven into taking away Israel's blessing. He failed completely. But when the Moabites simply offered the Israelites a chance to indulge their flesh, the people freely surrendered, the very blessing God had just fought to protect. God shielded them from an enemy they could not see, but they gave themselves over to an enemy they could see. They survived the cosmic spiritual warfare. They fell to an ordinary, quiet compromise. It is a devastating contrast. A people completely protected from the outside, but entirely vulnerable from the inside. They could not be cursed by a king, but they could be ruined by their own wandering hearts. This tragic shift reveals the deepest lesson of the entire Balak sequence. It moves the narrative from a story about ancient kingdoms right into the core of human nature. And that prepares us to see what this pattern means for the modern believer. The story of Balak ends with a profound and sobering contrast. It reveals the exact shape of God's covenant protection, and it exposes the only real vulnerability his people have. For 3 chapters, we watched a king throw the wealth of an empire at the spiritual realm. He built altar after altar. He sacrificed bull after bull. He dragged a prophet to 3 different summits, desperately looking for an angle, a weakness, or a crack in the armor. And he found absolutely nothing. He learned that the blessing of God is not a fragile commodity. It cannot be bought. It cannot be outbid. It cannot be reversed by a stronger spell or a darker mountain. Thousands of years later, the Apostle Paul would write a sentence in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, that captures the exact theological reality Balak crashed into. Paul asks, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" We often read that verse as a piece of light encouragement, a nice sentiment for a difficult day. But it is not just a motivational phrase. It is a massive, immovable truth built on the history of God's people. Balak was against them. The royal treasury of Moab was against them. The dark economy of the ancient Near East was against them. And it meant absolutely nothing. When God has placed his favor on a people, the external forces of the world cannot dismantle it. We spend so much of our time fearing the external threats. We fear the culture. We fear those who oppose us. We fear spiritual attacks from the outside, assuming that our protection is fragile and constantly on the verge of breaking. We act like Balak, believing in an economy of fear. But the view from the mountains of Moab changes how we see our security. God defends his people even when they are asleep in the valley. He shields them from enemies they do not even know are there. But the tragedy of Peor leaves us with a necessary warning. The enemy could not curse Israel. He could not break their ranks from the outside. So he invited them to dinner. He offered them an idol. He gave them a completely ordinary temptation. And the very people who survived the supernatural warfare on the high places surrendered their blessing in the dirt of the valley. They were untouchable from the outside, but they were deeply fragile on the inside. That is the enduring tension of the believer. Our greatest threat is not an external curse. No one can steal the grace that God has spoken over your life. No power, no king, and no spiritual mercenary can reverse your standing in Christ. The only true danger to the people of God is their own wandering heart. The slow, quiet compromises we make when we think no one is looking. God will protect you from the curse of the enemy, but he will not force you to stay at his table if you choose to wander into the tents of Moab. The story of Balak is a masterpiece of biblical narrative. It shows us the terrifying heights an enemy will climb to destroy us, and the absolute sovereign power of a God who turns every intended curse into a multiplied blessing. It is a reminder that we are held by a covenant, not a contract. If this study has helped you see Scripture with fresh eyes, subscribe so you do not miss the next journey into the text. The story of the Moabite king was never just ancient history. It was the quiet architecture of grace,